Hello. I really wish that I could be with you in person tonight, but I'm not feeling well, and I'm not going to risk infecting you with anything other than ideas. So, this is a lightning talk meant for journalists and others who work in news media. I wish I could do this face to face because I don't work in your industry. I'm just a super fan who greatly values your contributions to society, and I hope that I can help you do better. In the next 15 minutes, I want to convince you of three things. One, fascists love paywalls. Two, micropayments save the music industry, and they can save yours too. And three, transaction fees are no longer a barrier for experimentation. The slogan of Jeff Bezos' newsletter is Democracy dies in darkness. That's a great line, but who turned off the light? Democracy dies when truth is behind a paywall and misinformation is free. The Fourth Estate wields little power when hearing what it has to say requires a loyalty pledge of $10 a month. When we protest, we go out into the streets. We don't first convince those in power to pay us to then listen to us. We tell them the truth for free. In a world where the web enables anyone to become mass media, audience reach is a less distinguishing characteristic. We're also drowning in opinions. No one cares unless you're a genuine expert or entertaining. Facts with observable verification trails and context, they've become more valuable as a result. And providing those builds trust, and reputation is consistent behavior over time. People don't subscribe because they value facts. People subscribe because you're fighting for truth and for them. So, what do you stand for? How do you demonstrate alignment with values shared by an audience? Building an audience requires putting yourself out there alongside the voices who share your values. And you can't do that from a paywall, just like you can't hold power accountable from behind one. For every truth published behind a paywall, there is a multitude of lies published freely. Paywalls are a retreat from public discourse. You can't fight unless you are in the arena. So, what are news publishers supposed to do when Google, Meta, and Taboola keep devaluing display ad rates? Well, micropayments saved the music industry, and I think that they can save yours too. Now, how many people use Napster and BitTorrent to download a song? I did on a 56K modem as a poor kid living in a farm town. I think music file sharing apps were the first truly killer app of the internet. My father's coworkers would pay me $20 as a kid to help them learn how to use Napster. And the only thing that they did prior to that was email. And the music industry tried to frame this meteoric rise of file sharing apps as people hate musicians because you don't steal from people you love. But I've never met someone who genuinely hated musicians or advocated for their economic disempowerment. So when I say piracy, I mean something like Robin Hood stealing. But we have to acknowledge that even people who were buying, music released, they reduced the number of albums significantly that they were buying. Piracy had such a profound effect on the music industry revenue that it took 20 years to recover. And those are two of the decades when there were cultural phenomena of the iPod and the iTunes Music Store. But legal song downloads didn't save the music industry. They barely softened the decline. The music industry was saved by music streaming services, and the RIA's own data shows this. The arrival of smartphones, faster cell data networks, and partnering with Facebook to make music listening a social activity that could be done across space and time again convinced millions of people to stop pirating and instead pay half the price of a CD album a month for music instead. And now, not only are people just generally not pirating, they get big mad for artists not being paid enough. That's a radical cultural change in a short amount of time. Spotify doesn't pay artists well. It's one of my favorite things to hear people complain about because it's a bit misdirected anger because Spotify pays 70% of its revenue to rights holders, as does every other streaming music provider. And why is that? Well, that's because the big three music label oligopoly dictates the terms for licensing their content to streaming services. And the big three have all of the negotiating power. If a music streaming service doesn't have access to the big three's catalog, its customers will just switch to a competing streaming service the moment that they can't listen to their favorite song anymore. So here's a quick explainer of how music streaming services actually pay out royalties. 70% of a monthly subscription revenue in a country is set aside as a royalty pool. At the end of that month, all of the song listens from those subscribers in those country are total. And then each song gets its percentage of the royalty pool based on the number of plays that it had in relation to the total number of song plays. Users don't pay per stream, and neither do streaming services. So anyone who uses the amount paid per stream as evidence that Spotify pays artists less is just uninformed. People who subscribe to Spotify, they tend to listen to more songs than people who subscribe to Apple Music, so the amount paid per song on Spotify might be less, but both services are paying the same 70% of their music streaming revenue to rights holders. So if you want a music streaming service to pay artists more, personally subscribe to the most expensive music service. It will still pay 70% of its revenue in royalties. It's just 70% of a bigger number. And while imperfect, this model has been a massive success. More artists in more countries are making more money than they did before piracy. Spotify's annual Loud and Clear report shares the data to back this up. More people than ever before are paying for music, and they're listening to more artists than people did before piracy because they're able to easily discover new music to love. And more people are making and publishing their music than ever before because the big three labels are no longer gatekeepers. They're just inhibitors of continued economic progress. So, streaming music, it's a micropayments model. Every song you play on a music streaming service is a paid transaction. Now, admittedly, this is not a micro settlement model because the music streaming services aggregate those micropayments into macropayments, but that could change in the future because transaction fees are no longer a barrier for experimentation. After I worked at Spotify, I worked at a payments company called Stripe. Today, I'm a tech lead and grant program officer at the Interledger Foundation. The Interledger Foundation aspires to improve digital financial inclusion by supporting global interoperability of payment networks. And it does this by convening and funding financial service providers, policymakers, regulators, educators, and activists to create free and open source financial technology standards and implementations. We mostly work in the global south today. I want to share one of the biggest trends in the payment industry in the last few years. It's not cryptocurrencies, but the expansion and improvement of central banks providing central clearinghouses. Clearinghouses are where money moves between banks and financial service providers. And when these central banks use modern technology, they can provide no-fee transactions and instant settlement 24 hours a day. This is digital public infrastructure. And if the internet was the information superhighway, then central clearing is the payment superhighway. It costs a central bank far less to operate digital ledgers, which is in the finance world what we call databases, than it does to print, store, secure, transport, and maintain physical cash and coin money. The cost savings alone allows central clearing to outcompete every privately owned money movement infrastructure. And that allows retail banks to move money between themselves on behalf of their customers without needing to charge a transaction fee. And that then encourages business and consumers to keep their money as deposits in bank instead of taking it out as cash, which that then enables banks and their customers to earn more interest from the deposits that get held in the central bank, which provides even more economic incentive for banks to promote this type of payment method. Now, this infrastructure has been built and achieved those stated benefits in the US with FedNow, the EU with the PSD2 regulation, India with UPI, and Brazil with PIX. There are tens of similar efforts underway in other countries that have been announced, and I expect all of them will in time. So, what does this mean for content publishers? Well, once your country has a digital payment method with no transaction fee and instant settlement, you now have the freedom to explore revenue models other than monthly subscriptions. When there's no 25-cent base fee for accepting Visa and MasterCard, you could explore an idea like, what if we ask the 1.3 billion ad blocker users to pay the same amount that you would have earned had they loaded those ads on your website? Well, if you assume a very generous €10 display ad CPM and an average of 5 ads per page, that would mean like a new site makes 5 cents per page view. Try charging that. With modern browser APIs and payment apps, there's no longer a huge effort to send a payment with entering card numbers and addresses and stuff. It's just a finger or QR code scan, and it's done. Now, I know that sounds scary because some content does cost more to produce, and I understand this is why publishers want recurring subscriptions instead of payments for single pieces of media. But that's the old music industry mentality of selling a $20 album when someone really only wants the 2 best songs. Sell the song to your casual fans, and then keep selling the album to your super fans. You are going to earn more revenue overall. Now, the Interledger Foundation has supported multiple implementations of this idea. The most notable one is web monetization, but our community has proposed even more implementations that we hope to fund explorations of too. Be brave enough to try more than one approach, and beware any single vendor solution backed by US VCs who support fascist leaders. So, I hope I've convinced you that paywalls are a retreat from public discourse, that more people paying a little has the potential for immensely greater revenue, and that instant payment public infrastructure unblocks testing small transaction monetization methods. I wish I could be with you in person to discuss these ideas tonight. However, there are some people attending that I want you to find and talk to about these ideas. They've received grants from the Interledger Foundation to advance their respective areas of expertise. So if I say your name, please raise your hand so people can find you. Caroline Sinders has done insightful research into harmful design patterns and how they can erode trust. And that's really unfortunate to the news media, where trust is important, and they're also some of the worst offenders when it comes to people managing their subscriptions. Matt Baer is the developer of Write Freely, a content management system that has support for web monetization integrated today. Ian Forster, he worked at The Beep for many years and has some great ideas for micropayment models beyond what web monetization can do today. And Evan Perdramo is the co-founder of the Social Web Foundation and is leading multiple projects this year to examine the economic and operational realities for online content publishers and community-owned platforms. So with that, thank you for listening. I hope you have a great event.